evening, morning, afternoon, midnight, dawn, whatever time of day you decide to put this on. We are the Hit Players. It's been a minute since I've said that. Back again with another review. This week, we're reviewing the Elvis movie, sorry. We're reviewing the Elvis movie, aptly titled Elvis. Our favorite director in the world, Baz Luhrmann. He's back. He's back again. It's his first feature since, I think, The Great Gatsby in 2013.
2013.
Yeah. So your boy is back. And he's making it known that he worked on this movie because his name is on the poster like 15 times. And it's only, it's just a regular movie poster. So
He even has 2 screenwriting credits. He has a story by credit, and then he has 2 screenwriting credits.
Well, and he also has 2 different writing partners. So his name appears 3 times in the screenwriting. It's so stupid the way that works. That is the power of unions, folks. Anyways, moving on. So we watched Elvis. Before we begin with reviewing the movie, though, your quick feelings, I guess, for lack of a better word, on Elvis, the actual musician, to kind of lay the groundwork for how we feel about the movie.
Never cared.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where it's understandable the impact he had on American culture and the influence he had on American music.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing was that it just never connected with me as a kid. Going back and listening to some stuff in preparation for this movie, I think a lot of it was very good. Suspicious Minds stands out the most. I listened to his very first record, which, by the way, I hope you really like the song Suspicious Mind, Hound Dog, and Blue Suede Shoes, because those are the only 3 Elvis songs you will hear throughout this entire movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen.
They play pretty much nothing else.
And what's the first one he did? The very, very first song he did. I forget what it's called. But they play that one like 3 or 4 times
I will find out.
in the movie. Is that it for your Elvis opinion? Yeah, I think it's hard. He's an interesting character, at least in terms of American music and as an American artist, because like there's one spectrum of people who say he's one of the greatest artists of all time in American history, and those people are wrong. But then there's also people who are like, well, he wasn't really anything. He stole from black artists. He was just a hack and a voice of these studios, and those people are also wrong to a degree, because it's like, the guy was a showman, right? Yeah. If the name of the game is put on a show for people and entertain them, he did that. He did that, at that point, better than any other American artist. And you could, reasonably argue of all time, he's probably one of the biggest American artists.
His greatest skill was taking other artists' song and finding emotions in them that they almost didn't originally intend to be in there.
Yeah.
A lot of his early songs are actually like originally from the original artists, either like ballads or sad songs, sad love songs, breakup songs that he then turned into things you could dance to.
Like bops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He was the originator of sad boy music.
The song is That's All Right.
He's the reason, thank you. He's the reason Drake has a career right now, unironically. But I think I was more interested in just...
Drake biopic one day.
I hope not. I think I was more interested in Elvis the person, because it is a sad story.
This is absolutely a movie about Elvis the person.
Yes, which I will get to in a little bit, but I think I came away from that appreciating that a whole lot, because you think Baz Luhrmann, you look at Great Gatsby and all those other works, and you're like, oh, there's going to be a lot of flash and not a lot of substance. But I
Yeah.
think he blended the two. I mean, it's a movie about Elvis. There's gonna be flash. There's gonna be pops and
Pizzazz.
bangs and whizzang, blah blah blah. A lot of blurs and a lot of like the first 10 minutes. I think I got a headache. Just
I did
the
too.
camera
Yeah.
movements, the cuts, the visual effects. There's a lot of visual effects in this movie. The transitions. It was like,
Yeah.
wow. But then it settles into a nice groove of like it's still a lot, but it's I guess you become accustomed to it, or just Boz was like, okay, maybe we should just chill.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of those things where all of his movies are like that, really, where his movies are always structured like that. He has those periods where he does these like montages that are just visual, like I don't know, like a smoothie
Overload.
or blender. Yeah, it's almost overloading. Which is not to say that like they were necessarily cheap visual effects.
No.
There were some of them where I was like, that's just ridiculous. But a lot of the scene transitions are very smooth, very well done. But he'll structure his movies where there are these montages that just totally overload your senses, and then these breaks of actual plot, I guess, or not plot, but like
Story.
usually the slower,
Yeah.
sadder character-driven moments. He will slow down, and one thing Baz Luhrmann does very well, though, and something I've appreciated, but also like struggled to enjoy, is the lengths he will go to heighten every emotion felt by every character in every scene. I think he's generally mellowed out throughout his career. Like Romeo and Juliet is an example where it feels like he wanted every word to just come across with the maximum amount of emotion and power. I feel like Great Gatsby is a good example where you'll have the party scenes, and that like he uses that to kind of blow up, and then he uses the slower moments where he kind of chills out. I think this movie is following more in that vein, where he's just kind of, you have the showmanship parts, and then you have the kind of quiet Elvis Presley parts, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
That being said, I absolutely did get a headache in the first like half hour. Of this.
Yeah, I was like, if we gotta watch 2.5 hours of this, this might be a long night for me. But I thought it was really well done. It
overall was not as bad.
Yeah,
as
I think we both went into this well, I went into it semi hesitantly. I don't know about you.
I was not hesitant whatsoever because I suggested we see this. So
okay, fair enough.
Will say this: I went in expecting it to be the visual gore fest
Overload
that people were saying it was like Speed Racer.
Yeah,
and as much as I love that movie, I was like, I hope it's like that to some degree. It isn't, but the fact that it isn't doesn't detract from my overall the amount of enjoyment I got from this movie.
Yeah, and this is a very enjoyable movie. I mean, it's hard to make a movie about music not enjoyable, to a degree, because like part of the enjoyment is just listening to the music.
Yeah,
of artists
there
that
are
you like.
Absolutely movies that Elvis Presley made in real life.
Okay, yeah, well that's different. That's not I'm talking about a movie about a musician, I should say. Because part of the experience is actually like listening to the music in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I also enjoy just the actual character progression, quote unquote, progression of Elvis, and just like how much of his life was like a Shakespearean tragedy of like a guy who had nothing, was poor, living in the colored section of town, had it all, and then just lost it all and died at the age of 42. It's like, that is the epitome of the candle that burns twice as bright, burns twice as fast.
Now, did you know anything about the Colonel Parker story?
No, actually I didn't, which is...
I did not either.
I mean, we all know about Elvis's life. We know about his personal life struggles and stuff like that, but I had no idea that the Colonel Parker was a
character
manager,
even existed.
he was a real person.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about like he's more or less the reason Elvis died is because
Yeah.
he just kept pushing him literally to the point of exhaustion. Like I grew up thinking Elvis was just a just a junkie, and it was just like that's just who he was. But when you read about
Yeah.
this guy who pushed him to the breaking point, it was kind of like, damn, makes it even more sad when you realize it like that.
So, as a young person who did not know the story of Elvis's life before this, I did my research before seeing this movie, but even then, I don't think the Colonel Parker character even really came up. However, after seeing this movie and doing some research, the amount of influence he had on Elvis's career is it was tremendous in ways that it's like he really helped Elvis like become the popular artist that he was, but he also like in an almost Machiavellian type of way. The whole scene with Elvis going to the army with him, like he planned it in terms of like he made it like a photo op.
Yeah.
The whole thing that they would change Elvis's image, that was part of the plan the entire time. He even like he went to the Pentagon and was like, I want you to put Elvis in these units with these troops so that way they like treat him this way. All of that was set up by him.
The department, or not the department, the army even offered Elvis like, hey, you want to work at special services? You can be like
you want to
you can be like a
and
tour.
not get shot at. Yeah.
And Parker was like, no,
Yeah.
we like first off, you're not making money off my artists without my consent because he'll be performing for free, and you guys can still have rights to that. And also like two, this is such a wasted opportunity for his, because before he went to the army, he wasn't really all that yet. He was like a becoming star.
Yeah.
But when he came back, it was like, oh shit, Elvis, Elvis saw the war.
Yeah.
Not really, but you know what I'm saying. And it just added to the mythos. I mean, just like imagine Billie Eilish joins the Air Force.
Hold up.
Just think about that.
Interesting.
Think about how crazy that would be.
Here's the thing, though, and this movie kind of touches on it, but they don't go super in depth on it. I think probably the biggest influence in the shift in Elvis's career was the death of his mother. Something I was really interesting to learn was that he had a incredibly close relationship to her.
Oh yeah,
and it's kind of brought up in this movie, as in it's like a plot point, but it's never made too important a plot point where.
yeah,
Like, you're on Elvis's side, and he wants to go out and be the greatest artist of all time. And so, like, the movie focuses a lot more on that than it does on the impact of his relationship with his mom, so that when she dies... None of this is a spoiler, because it's all true, so no spoiler warning for this entire thing anyway. We all know Elvis dies
Elvis
anyway.
dies at the end, guys.
Spoiler alert, guys.
Sorry.
But when she died, that was, as far as I can tell from what I've learned, the real turning point in his attitude towards his career,
Yeah,
and probably when he really began to take it seriously, in terms of more like having a bit more integrity towards how long lasting it can be. I think that's just for what I have gleaned from reading up on this myself, because the movie almost doesn't touch on that whatsoever.
yeah,
And the movie focuses a lot more on making it seem like Thomas Parker was the only person who had a hand in the shape of his career. And that is something else about this movie that, because I think a lot of people our age have never learned about who Colonel Parker is whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, for
the
sure.
fact that this movie is not only about their relationship, but from Colonel Parker's perspective, like he is narrating this movie. It's like
he's goddamn Ray Liotta, in
Yeah.
Goodfellas.
I don't know. I was so confused. Because on the one hand, here's this guy who basically controlled Elvis's entire life and career.
Yeah.
But the movie almost paints him like they want us to be. I couldn't tell if they wanted us to be sympathetic to him or not.
Oh, I was not
It's
sympathetic whatsoever.
To me, well, it's one of those things where he is the first character we are introduced to. So the assumption is he's the person you are empathetic to.
Yeah.
but the movie ends up not being by the end. And they never go in depth about his past. They never go in depth about his own motivations. So I guess we're just left to say it's superficial. That he just wanted the money that Elvis was getting.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah, but like, why?
because money makes the world go round.
But why his world? What did
'Cause
he?
money
What
is
was he
good.
missing? It makes sense for Elvis because he grew up extremely poor and wanted a good life for his family.
Sure.
But we're not told anything about.
Well, that's the thing, though, is he was this mysterious figure.
Not even
That-
at the end of the movie when
Like
died.
he was this mysterious figure who nobody knew about. It was just like he just showed up, and it was
I
like,
think
what?
the idea of having a movie about Elvis from another person's perspective is really interesting, and probably a pretty good way to do a biography. I think the issue is that the person they chose is the most unreliable narrator you possibly could have chosen. And the movie flips back and forth between these are the objective facts about Elvis Presley's life, and this is the skewed version of his life from the point of view of the guy who just wanted money.
But
from
I never
him.
felt like he was unreliable. I mean, he's reliable in the sense that we know he's crooked from like day one. Because
Yeah,
he even says
absolutely.
like, the first thing he says is, "People will call me the devil of this story," and then I killed Elvis, and it's like, and then you actually watch the movie and you're like, yeah, they're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You did kill Elvis. Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't think like he's not trying to force us to like think, because he has no redeeming qualities whatsoever in the movie,
No.
other than the fact that he gave Elvis a shot,
Yeah.
quote unquote. But it was just like, I don't know. I never once was like, Tom Hanks, yes, you are the good guy in this movie. I was
You just-
always like,
yeah.
you are just a terrible human being.
My issue is not the fact that I would sympathize with him. It's the fact that the movie, in a way, does. Because it's almost from his perspective. That, to me, was just a weird level of cognitive dissonance that I just didn't really...
It added another layer for sure. Because
Yeah.
if this was just a straight
If this
shot,
was just a straight Elvis... Actually, I don't think this movie would be as interesting if it was just a purely
Yes,
Elvis
I agree.
focused.
I agree.
If it was just a straight biography. I think the fact that they make Thomas Parker basically the central character adds intrigue, I think.
Mhm.
At least for me. It was very intriguing to watch this movie.
I did also like the use of non-linear storytelling.
That too.
Because it's like too many times we watch these biopics where it's like, oh, they're born,
Yeah.
they do this, they discover their passion, they do this,
Mhm.
B, A, B, B. It's like, okay, what do? We just read a Wikipedia page?
Yeah.
But it's like, no, we're starting on Thomas Parker's deathbed, and then we're going to go back to Elvis when he first missed Elvis. And then we're going to go back even further to Elvis's childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to go forward a couple more years, and then we're going to
Mhm.
go back to that first meeting, and then we're just going to go all the way, and then we're back at the deathbed.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, like,
Not only that, but even within individual scenes where they will edit a scene or just structure a scene so multiple actions take place simultaneously
Yeah.
when linearly they take place chronologically. And that might be confusing for some people. I say that because it was not confusing for me whatsoever. But there are definitely moments where I was like, okay, I have to like bunker down and keep track of which cut is taking place at what point
it's
in
like
time.
it's like Inception.
Almost, yeah. It's like a Inception on crack.
Yeah.
With a lot of
Yeah.
rhinestones.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice flavor, because it also does show his, like, what inspired him. You know, because a lot of these movies, especially biopics, they'll be, when they talk about inspiration, they always talk about it in the past tense.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily the case
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to, an artist's inspiration, because that inspiration is always with them.
Mm-hmm.
So showing that, like, I guess, callbacks more or less.
Yeah. Well, the
It
thing
just
I would
makes it-
say,
To me, it just makes it cool,
yeah,
because it's like you're in Elvis's head at that
Mhm.
moment in time.
and it's like for me, the way I saw it, it's not really influences on Elvis, but the influences for the particular songs. Because like there's a scene where he performs, I already forgot what it was called. All that. What
Yeah, I don't remember. That was like 20 minutes
Despite
ago.
the fact that they perform it so many times throughout the song, there's a moment in it where he performs a song in Vegas, and it does the three-way cut between the Vegas performance, his original first recording of it, and his original first listen to it as a kid.
Yeah.
And showing that trajectory of just the evolution of how he views that song and performs it. They do that a lot throughout the movie. They do that with Hound Dog all the time. They do it with Blue Suede Shoes. Those are like the only 3 songs he ever plays in the movie, but still. And just that evolution of those individual songs, that is very well done, I think.
Yeah.
Doing it that way was super cool, I think.
That was the high point.
Even if the editing was
a bit much.
a bit much. The use of split screen, probably a little unnecessary, but I get it. Nevertheless.
Yeah. How do you feel about Austin Butler? How did you feel about Austin Butler?
I feel like he barely talked.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree with that.
for a movie about Elvis probably has less dialogue
Than Tom Hanks.
than Tom Hanks does. Which is so weird because he would start speaking and he would do an Elvis like impression, and I would be like, "Oh yeah, that's right. He is playing Elvis in this movie." And he's not just standing there and nodding at whatever.
He's
Tom
like
Hanks
a ghost for the first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's so weird whenever he gets actual emotion. You're like the first time he yells at his mom when they're at Graceland. He yells at his mom and then he's yelling at his friends like, "Get the hell out of my goddamn house. What are you doing?" I'm like, whoa.
Where's this come from?
Is this character in my movie? Like, what is this?
Yeah,
This-
seriously.
I thought you were just supposed to stand in the corner and look brooding.
Yeah. Which he also does for like the first 20 minutes of this movie.
So-
When is Austin Butler going to play Batman?
I definitely appreciated the moments we got Austin Butler to actually talk.
Yeah.
There are some times where I was like, he doesn't look anything like Elvis. And then there are some moments where I'm like, whoa.
That's how I felt
pretty
the end.
good.
At the end of the movie. They show actual concert footage, and I was like, "That's a very impressive costume." And then I clicked where I was like, "Oh wait, no, this is just actual footage of Elvis."
Yeah,
Which I still thought that was
it was footage, and then they
Yeah.
cut to
the actual concert.
footage.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was so seamless
crazy.
that I was
Yeah.
like,
No, I agree.
"Yeah,
Like if I hadn't noticed the drop in picture quality,
yeah."
I would have been like, this is the same thing.
I will say this though: the only issue I have is the fact that they don't really age him that well.
Yeah,
Tom Hanks ages, Priscilla ages, but Austin Butler, there's a scene where he's like, "I can't believe I'm going to be 40," and I'm like, "What?" No, you're not.
Especially because the real Elvis aged a lot
Yeah, well, that was,
in the 20 years he was in show business.
due to his
and
lifestyle
there's,
that
like,
Austin Butler did not.
There are distinct Elvis looks just
Yeah.
for his career, and it was like that was the one thing that I was upset about was like he had distinct hairstyles, he had distinct wardrobes, he had distinct. I mean, just his face, like the way
They
it
did
filled
good on the
out,
wardrobes. They did very good on the
the way it
wardrobes.
filled- yeah.
Just Austin Butler stays the same age the entire movie.
I mean, he wrinkles, he gets greasy
Mm-hmm.
as he gets older. His hair gets more unkempt. It's like, okay, we kind of did it, but we also didn't really do it enough.
The only times you really notice the only time it feels like he ages is when they're doing concerts. That's when it feels like I really noticed his, like when he looked older
Yeah,
than his own age is what I mean. Because he's 30 years old, Austin Butler, and I think when he was doing Teen Elvis, all the, him on stage doing all that, he looked almost like a younger 20-year-old Elvis. And when he was in Las Vegas doing the, crooner Elvis, he also looked like a 40-year-old man. But there are scenes where he's like in his home talking to Priscilla, where he just looks like a 30-year-old guy. And I'm like, no, you're not 42 years old. What are you talking about? Oh, how easy is it to tell the difference? I don't know.
how do you feel about Tom Hanks?
So I had the same issue you had with his accent.
I hated it.
It's a little atrocious.
They should have just left him. I don't like it.
He probably talked that way in real life,
Yeah.
but for the narrator of this movie, he was often incomprehensible.
And it was just annoying.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to say that because it's not really a good analysis, but it was just an annoying voice to be hearing.
Here's what was
for
annoying about it.
almost literally the entire movie.
It felt like so constricting for him that completely took away from his range. He had no emotion other than slight anger.
Yeah.
And that was all that he
All he did was just change his pitch and his tone of voice.
Whatever he had to do that accent almost took away from his
Yeah.
acting abilities, that is to say. Because I think Tom Hanks
That being
sold
said-
the character well.
I was gonna say, that being said, yes, it was a very good character job.
Absolutely, yeah. Tom Hanks is still a good actor.
Who
would have thought?
There were times where I was like, "Oh, that is actually Tom Hanks," because I was just, he just blended so well. I was just like,
There's a
yeah,
shot where
that's
they
Tom.
he's having the dream sequence where he's like at the roulette table and he sees his older self across from him, and I was like, that's another actor. No, that's still Tom Hanks in like an older fat suit.
Yeah, I thought Tom Hanks was.
He does well. The accent he had to do, however, was just too restricting for
too much.
what we could have
A little
gotten
too
from him.
much.
Yeah. What did you think about the other music in this movie?
I was gonna say that was gonna be my next question. Doja Cat, spoiler alert, makes an appearance.
Doja Cat,
like,
Denzel Curry,
halfway
Eminem.
through not even halfway through the movie. I think it's literally within the first 20 minutes probably.
Toxic by Britney Spears gets played in at some point, which is probably the worst offender out of all of these. Here's the thing. I'll say this. Of the songs, I assume they're all original songs. They have to be because they all transcribe chords from songs that Elvis has recorded.
Yeah.
That being said, why Toxic by Britney Spears of all things? Especially during their marriage sequences.
Who knows?
Baz Luhrmann did it in Great Gatsby, so
Yeah.
I forgave it as something he does, but I would like to not see it again.
It's just really hard to like
Like a trap remix of an Elvis song is not something I
exactly
need to
because
hear.
there's such a rich music catalog. If it's one thing if you're, it's the 1920s Great Gatsby and you're like, all right, let's just make a swankier version of I don't know, any song off Watch the Throne.
an electro swing
all right,
version of
Fair enough.
1920s.
1920s music doesn't really lend itself well to the type of movie you make.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair play to you, boss. But when you're in literally probably the 2 decades with the richest music catalog and you're using freaking Doja Cat and Britney
Yeah.
Spears, no.
They really
No.
limited Elvis's influence to just
His performances.
the stuff that he listened to as a kid.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like it was gospel and blues, and that was the only, apparently according to this movie, that was the only influence Elvis ever had on anything he ever performed. Not the case, but that's what they do in this movie.
It would have been cool to see some like country because I mean he has some country and he's inspired by country mainly.
They didn't include
even like his contemporaries.
no
Like
Buddy Holly.
The Beatles.
Yeah.
I was even thinking later, like the Beatles, the Stones. There's Zeppelin. I think intersects at some point.
They get mentioned, but they just never appear sonically, or their characters are never there.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if when they're talking about Elvis's decline, you just hear, here comes the sun, do do do, and it's Elvis just sitting there like depressed out of his mind in his room.
In terms of the timeline, they probably would have been twist and shout instead of.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Well, I know what I mean.
I don't know the entire timeline of the Beatles. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more they could have done there as far as the music. I don't think it's like the worst offense when Doja Cat started playing because I was like, oh, it's Beale Street, like, Beale Street at this. Well, I mean even now, but at this point in time was like the spot, in Memphis. So it's like, oh, this is signifying that this is the party spot. But
Beale Street, in fact, could talk in this movie.
I don't know. Why don't you just play actually like blues?
Yeah.
From like actual blues.
I've
artists
heard
of the time.
you've played Hound Dog like 4 times already. Play something else.
Please, Boz, what are you doing? What else?
Assuming that it was the actor singing, I don't believe that it was live singing at all. But assuming that they recorded their own versions of the songs that they then
Probably.
sung over in the movie, I think if that's the case, they all did very well.
I agree.
Even assuming Austin Butler is doing his own covers of Elvis songs, I think he did very well. His singing voice, at least his Elvis impression of, is pretty good. Overall, here's the thing. I saw this movie because I heard that it was terrible. And it was just going to be a visual, like, graphic design is my passion, levels of bad. And it was all over the place. Wouldn't make any sense. Wouldn't even be historically accurate. And walking out of it, well, it is not entirely historically accurate.
Yeah, I don't think he actually shouted at on stage.
He did
and called
not
out his manager.
call him out on stage. No.
I knew that was BS as soon as I saw it. I was like, there's no way. There's no way that's real.
It is not as visually disorienting as I was told it would be. It is not as horribly acted as I was told it would be. It is not even as Baz Luhrmann as I was told it would be.
Our boy's grown in the 9 years it took him.
That being said, though, if you want to see something that's kind of like not good, I would recommend this movie.
You don't think it's good?
It's a fun time. Whoa, no. It's... I honestly don't know if I can recommend this movie, but I would still say that I had fun. It's hard.
No, I would recommend this movie.
You would?
Yeah. Because the only people who are going to go see this movie are Elvis fans. I'll say this. This is a way better biopic of an artist, of a musician, than Bohemian Rhapsody.
That's true.
I will say that. And I will say that, and I will fight anyone in the comments who disagrees with me. Because
I actually
Bohemian Rhapsody is just, like, as a movie itself, constructed bad. The actual history of that movie makes no sense. There are so many omissions. There are so many timelines, like events happening in wrong periods of time that don't make sense. The characters don't make any sense. There are so many things wrong with Bohemian Rhapsody. This movie, I will say, at least captures the essence and the story of Elvis as good as it can be. Obviously, there's going to be some, some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like bias.
Yeah.
A lot of bias. But I think it does what it tried to do, for lack of a better phrase. And that is just to tell the story of Elvis the way it should be told.
I'll say this. My computer completely overheats. When it comes to biographies, capturing the entire life of a person is impossible.
Yes.
With the limited amount of time that you're given in the commercial release of a film. Usually, in my experience, the biographies that do very well are the ones that just focus on elements of a person's life or particular moments in a person's life. And I think that this movie, focusing specifically on his relationship with Colonel Parker, is what makes this movie better than if it was just a normal biopic.
Yeah.
And the fact that they focus on the Colonel Parker character more than they do Elvis, I actually think makes this a good representation of Elvis. I mean, while he may not have been a good person in real life, the fact that the entire Elvis family has said this is an incredibly, good representation of what he was like in real life, based on the fact that we barely learn anything about Elvis as a person throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I watched some musical biopics in preparation for this, just to kind of get a sense of how do you portray an artist's life. But this movie almost isn't a musical biography. It's more so just...
It's more of the story of their relationship.
Yeah, it's a biography, but it's not about Elvis as a musician. It's just about his relationship with his manager.
Yeah. And how that affects every other relationship he has in his life. Because, he loses every relationship other than his dad. But his dad's also stupid.
And he never loses his relationship with music.
Yeah.
And that is something they make very certain you know by the end of this movie. Because they blame you.
Literally.
Literally.
We killed Elvis, guys. We killed Elvis.
They do that.
Does this movie paint a better or I don't want to say worse light, but what kind of picture, I guess, does this paint for you as far as Elvis? Knowing what you knew before, quick Wikipedia scan, watching the movie now, do you like sympathize with him more? Do you think he's still...
So for me, the biggest thing about Elvis that I could not wrap my head around, for as long as I ever thought about Elvis, or anytime I ever did think about Elvis, the transition from the Ed Sullivan Show kind of, early rockabilly stuff to the Las Vegas Eagle suit stuff, I never could wrap my head around that transition.
Yeah.
And this movie spends a lot of time in both of those eras. And I think it kind of... It helped me understand how he got from one point to the other. I think just the kind of person Elvis was, who wanted fame, wanted money for his family, fame so that he could get money to provide for his mother.
Yeah.
Those being his motivations, the opulence that he indulges in by the time he's in Las Vegas, I get it now. I think I had previously just saw Elvis as being this, he was a rebel artist in the 50s when people thought that, wearing shorts was obscene. Or something like that, And from that to him being old and fat in Las Vegas never made any sense. But having looked at his life, seeing this movie now too, that transition makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
Although it's still one hell of a head trip to know that happened to him.
He might be one of the artists who makes one of the biggest changes throughout his career.
Because here's the thing too.
It's like him and Beatles.
Yeah.
Make the two from the beginning of their careers where they were and how, from literally every facet of their life and their, career and their profession to the end of their career. It's huge jumps.
The two I can think of, because these are movie biopics that I watched in preparation for this, were the Beatles and the Beach Boys. Where with the Beatles, it was being introduced to drugs and...
Shout out Bob Dylan.
Shout out to Bob Dylan, introduced the Beatles to marijuana. And meditation as well. And Indian philosophies. Really helped their transition into psychedelic music, which kind of creates this weird before and after effect in Beatles music. And with the Beach Boys, it was Beatles music that inspired them to write Pet Sounds, which then created this psychedelic before and after effect in their career. And with Elvis, that before and after effect never really
made sense to you.
It never made sense.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to even have any motivation.
That's fair.
But I feel like just the fact that he just became more famous and then was forced to do this one thing for a very long time, it's understandable why he would create this. Not that he just created this character of Elvis, a stage persona, but he just embraced it and allowed it to kind of be its own thing. There is the point in this movie where he does his first show in Las Vegas. I think they did a good job of selling Elvis is now Elvis, a persona. It is not Elvis Presley, a kid from Tennessee who is just, trying to make it big. It is now a persona that he is.
It's an act.
Yeah, it is a stage act.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say for me. What about you?
Nice. I do sympathize with. Like I said, I went through a phase in middle school where I was a big Elvis fan. And
did you give yourself a pompadour? Slick your
no,
hair back?
No, I didn't do that. No. But I've been to Graceland. So I knew his whole story and everything. Graceland is a wonderful place to go visit. By the way, it makes you sad. Just seeing all that out there.
People still go there and they still cry to this day.
Yeah.
In the same way that people go to Strawberry Fields in New York and they cry at John Lennon's grave.
It's
it is an incredible. The impact that he had
70 years later. Well,
is
I guess
yeah,
after his death,
it's intangible.
50. No, it is 70 years. Yeah. Almost 70. It's Am I doing that math right? Hold on.
Don't worry
No,
about
no, no. 50. Sorry, 50. It's been a long day. Yeah, it's crazy because I mean, when you think of like when you ask anybody on the street, name an American artist, name an American musician, American singer, whatever, Elvis is gonna be at least second.
Yeah.
It'll be like Michael Jackson, Elvis, Eminem, or everybody's top three.
Eminem has a song in this movie as well at the end credits.
So it's like, yeah, this guy was a literal cultural icon. And it's just cool. It's cool to see his life played out on the big screen for once. I think, for me at least, because I was an Elvis fan, and I think it is a sad story. But
yeah, that is something by the end of this movie that it's a story I think in a lot of rock stars' career. You get all of your money taken from you, and you owe all this money, and you're in debt, but you're super famous. So you got
I mean,
what you wanted.
it literally happens now.
Yeah,
That's the way the industry's set up now. It's crazy.
But I don't know. Yeah, I think this movie, maybe because it's from Colonel Parker's perspective, whether or not he was as manipulating of Elvis's career as he is in the movie, you definitely see Elvis more as a victim than you do a artist who was like that. This was his intended trajectory. And the fact that some of this stuff did happen, 15 shows in 15 days across the United States, is not physically possible.
No.
It's understandable why he became addicted to morphine.
Yeah.
Or why they made him addicted to morphine so that he could do that. It's crazy. It's probably the most watchable Baz Luhrmann movie outside The Great Gatsby. I'll say that much.
Where would you rank it in terms of musical biopics?
Probably C tier, because I don't know if this is a musical biopic. I think it's just a biopic of him.
Of him?
Yeah. Because they show how this story impacts his music, but it is not a story of his music.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
what I would say.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's also hard to say. It's also hard to write a movie about his music when he didn't make his own music. I'm defending your point, by the way.
The movie does a good job of showing how he
got his inspiration.
Not just inspiration, how he evolved the music that he was inspired by.
Yeah.
Not evolved, but how he made it his own.
Put a twist in it. Yeah. Yeah.
That is really where his musicianship is shown in the movie, is how he would take these songs and make them his own. He never wrote any music that he ever performed.
No. Are you surprised we didn't get a toilet scene?
That was the only prediction I made before the movie, was that they were going to show him at least going to the bathroom. And they never do. So, spoiler alert.
I've seen that bathroom.
Really?
I mean, it's in Graceland.
Fair enough.
But they pointed out, they're like, that's the toilet. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I mean, you can't go in it or anything.
Understandable. You can't use it.
I was like, wow, that's absurd. It was very. If you're an Elvis fan, going to Graceland should be on your bucket list. It is definitely
going to Graceland. Also, seeing this movie, a lot of the other people in the theater were obviously people who grew up with Elvis.
I mean, we sat next to like a group of 4,
like 80-year-olds.
Yeah, they might have been swingers.
To that,
we don't know.
We don't know whether Baz Luhrmann makes this movie accessible to 80-year-olds is out of the question.
Probably not. They
Probably
probably all
not.
had to close their eyes.
There were points in this where I was like, I don't want to get a seizure watching this, please. I don't have epilepsy, and I feel like this is too far. I think, okay, I'll say this, though. In terms of Baz Luhrmann's career, this movie is probably an A.
Yeah.
It's his most accessible, which is saying a lot.
Easiest to easiest to ingest, to digest. Sorry.
I think the reason, I will say this, and this will be the last point I will make so far. The reason I have a hard time recommending this movie is probably because it's a Baz Luhrmann movie, and he makes such a specific type of movie.
No, that's a fair. That's
for
fair.
as much as I might have enjoyed this, might have had fun watching it, might actually rewatch it if I ever get the chance again. It's a Baz Luhrmann movie, and that is such a specific type of like movie that just resonates with such a specific type of person. We probably both enjoyed this because you like Great Gatsby and I like Romeo and Juliet. Unironically, I add that unironically, and not just because it has Radiohead in it either.
Though it doesn't hurt.
Does not hurt. That's probably why we enjoyed this movie as much as we did, because I've both enjoyed Baz Luhrmann movies in the past.
Yeah.
But I know people who will never touch a Baz Luhrmann movie with a 10-foot pole, and I can't sit here in good
blame
faith
them.
and say I would recommend this movie, because I don't recommend this movie to you if you don't like Baz Luhrmann, honestly.
Yeah,
even if
true.
you are an Elvis fan.
That is true.
So that would be my final review. That's at least my final words.
All right. I'm gonna put this one in the old B tier
Mm-hmm. I would too.
for me.
Yeah. Overall,
Good movie.
it's a good movie.
It was a good time.
But
I
it
had
is a
good time.
Baz Luhrmann movie.
There were times where and this will be the last point I make. There were times in the theater where I was like, actually like, whoa, this is like, I'm vibing with this. Like, especially when he was playing the music, or like I actually felt emotion. I was like, this is good. I wasn't expecting this, but this is good.
Yeah, that whole like Christmas special sequence.
Yeah. To me, that was the high point.
It's actually very suspenseful.
And it's It's very well done. Very well done.
And then they take a break, and then they go back to it, and it's even more suspenseful because it's like
that was a good 20-minute ride.
Very, very cool.
Anyways, so that was our review of Elvis.
As our review shows, we both give it a B.
We both give it a B.
Which is at least a one.
We
thumbs
both
up.
had a good time in the theaters.
Mm-hmm.
In the theater, excuse me.
We would both hit play on this movie. That's our new rating system. It's copywritten.
Hit play, hit stop, or hit pause. I don't know.
That's a good one. That's a good, because it's like if you give a movie hit pause, it's like you might go back to it.
Yeah, and hit stop is
might
like
not.
no,
It's like no,
get out of here. Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, we hit play.
We hit play.
So stupid. I hate that. Now we have to re-record every single podcast to just put that at the end of it.
All right. All the James Bond movies.
Hit play on all of them.
Paul Thomas Anderson, his entire career, hit play.
Hit play.
David
Only-
Fincher, his entire career, hit
No.
play.
Minus Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Hit pause.
We hit stop.
Hit stop. Yeah, okay, hit stop.
Anyways, we're out of here. This is going on for too long. We'll see you guys on the flip side. Have a good day. I'm gonna play some Elvis on the way out.